Everybody. Yeah, okay, fabulous. Well, we're going to start. Welcome, everybody, to the second Personalized Lifestyle Pearls. I always look forward to these sessions. I know that this is only the second one, but we have a series to come. So every month, we're going to have an expert that we're interviewing. Chris, are you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you pretty well. You have a little bit of an echo, but things are going pretty well for me. How about, can you hear me?
Sure. If anything else strange happens, well, I can adjust. I've got a headset here. So again, welcome everybody. Tonight we are talking with Dr. Chris Keroack.
That's me.
I love Hey, hello.
Hey, so it's going to be a lot of fun tonight. We're going to talk about lots of, taboo foods that should make you feel just a little bit dirty when they're actually making you healthy.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
I tell patients that when I tell them what they got to eat, I always say you should feel a little bit dirty while you're doing this kind of stuff.
Well, that kind of goes with Dr. Bob Browntree's idea of, making sure that we go back to the dirt, eating dirt.
Oh,
We become too clean and hygienic. So there is something to that. For those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Keroack, let me just give a little bit of a thumbnail. Dr. Keroack has done a lot of different things. He's a medical doctor. He's also certified as an IFM practitioner. Good to see you here, Carly.
Hi, Carly. I'm excited to learn too. We're going to have a great time.
He received his formal education from Amherst College, Springfield College. He has a master's, and also Tufts University School of Medicine. And what I really like about Chris is that I see him as a full spectrum practitioner. He's engaged, he's excited, he's passionate. He's really explored a lot of different areas in medicine. He's lectured, he's written a book. As you can see, the book is behind him. The title of his book is Changing Directions, Navigating the Path to Optimal Health and Balanced Living. It's a wonderful, very comprehensive book to get really immersed in your health. So tonight, we're going to talk about probably one of the most controversial topics in nutrition, I would say, and probably not just controversial, but people really want to know about the ketogenic diet. Why do you think?
Really coming into vogue, and it's just sort of, I hate to use this millennial term, but it's really hot right now, And so many people are just jumping on board, and I'm kind of excited to do this with you to just say, hey, you really should know before you jump in what this is all about.
Yeah, exactly. And hi, Rachel. Good to have you here. We've got a number of other physicians signing on, a lot of health practitioners that I also know. And by the way, everybody, start with your questions. Start lining them up. I already collected some from some of you. So, Chris, let's just dive right in. Well, first of all, in the thumbnail, why do you think the ketogenic diet has become so, as you say, hot? Why is that? I mean, we were enamored with the paleo diet. Why are we now moving towards the keto?
So what I think has really occurred is that the nation in general is starting to grow in girth. Our obesity crisis is continuing to be asymptotically large. And I remember when I first started getting into weight and weight management, there was this trend to follow the food pyramid. And we started going into this fat-free phase. So somewhere around the 90s, we said, well, fat has a lot of calories. We really got to get rid of it. And we started having all these fat-free foods and fat-free condiments and fat-free meals, and the paradigm of obesity actually backfired. We actually started getting fatter as a nation when we went fat-free. And I remember at one of the conferences, one of the leaders saying, I bet you what's going to happen is that people are going to do low protein, and then they're going to do low fat, and then they're going to do they're just going to pick something and change it. And I really think that some people just started experimenting with that and looking in the old literature, sort of old school ways of doing things, and discovered this sort of 60s plan that actually really started in the 20s, but the 60s plan of a high fat, medium protein, and low carbohydrate diet that led to rapid weight loss, among other things. And then it just really hit the world in regards to diabetes, in regards to cholesterol, and interestingly enough, in the world of performance and athletics. And now really, everybody is sort of blogging and commenting and hitting social media about it. And so everybody's trying it.
I'm kind of curious, being that I've been around Jeff Bland for so long, and I know that Jeff has always cultivated a very kind of steady Eddie, even keel, non-dogmatic approach to nutrition, and has always advocated personalized nutrition. Do you feel like with all these macronutrient swings and pendulums going from one macronutrient to the next, do you feel that this is a healthy thing to do? Do you think that it helps us as we think about personalization of patients' diets? I mean, is that...
I think that's a fair comment. Really, the idea of one size fits all cannot be true in anybody's plan for health. And it's interesting, when I got to tour the country and talk a little bit about the ketogenic diet, what came up was, well, when you start patients on your ketogenic plan and when you teach them about the ketogenic diet, I always stop people and say, well, really, I like to get to the root of things and then form a personalized plan for the patient. If that personalized plan is the ketogenic diet, then I teach them the ketogenic diet, but it really is not for everybody. But when you find the right patient, it is remarkable in terms of its effects.
Great. So the right patient, give us a short order list of some conditions. You already mentioned weight loss. Are there other things, neurological conditions, cancer? What are some indications that might warrant a keto diet approach?
So I'll always look at the components of like the strong literature and then the emerging literature. So thinking about the idea that, well, who is the clear-cut patient, the black and white, yes, this is the ideal, and then sort of the gray area. So in the black and white components, individuals who come in who really want a rapid aspect of weight loss, because weight loss is usually related to a component of insulin. Insulin is what we'll call a proliferative hormone. Proliferative means growth. So you're going to be growing fat cells, maybe muscle cells, but mostly fat cells. So when you start lowering the insulin components, you lose a lot more weight. But more than just weight loss, individuals who have diabetes, individuals who have cholesterol, and individuals with seizure disorders are really ideal in regards to the patients for the ketogenic diet. Oh, and so I saw some components of the genomics in the ketogenic diet. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that with ApoE and a number of the other ones, FTO.
And then there's some sort of interesting components where you have patients come in with skin disorders, specifically acne. Ketogenic diets are really ideal for acne because insulin and then changes in androgens occur beneficial to your skin in regards to the ketogenic diet. Patients
would also help with PCOS.
That's exactly so spot on. So this idea about PCOS, which is an insulin and androgen confusion, really a little bit of a challenging field in OBGYN. And depending on who you talk to, the endocrinologist or the OBGYN, they'll always pick a different angle, but it is a little bit more of a paradigm than just one pathway. And when you do the ketogenic plan, you're starting to influence the insulin and the androgens and the estrogens and really help women with PCOS. Respiratory conditions, so COPD and potentially asthma patients or lung disease patients, especially like the idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, the really strange diseases where your lungs start to become like rocks. When you take in high fat, you produce less carbon dioxide, so it's easier to breathe. Cancer patients, so cancer cells really run on sugar. You remove the sugar, they don't grow that well. Most cancer cells also have insulin receptors, so if you lower the insulin, it makes it harder for the cancer to grow. And then lastly, this is where I think the ketogenic diet versus the low-carb diet comes into play, is neurological disorders, because the brain really loves running on ketones, and it can change sort of the electrical activity of the brain. So there's emerging evidence in the world of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injury, migraines, and so those neurological patients can get a lot of help from the ketogenic plan too.
You know, from my review of the literature, that's one of the first conditions that I recall seeing connected to the ketogenic diet is epilepsy, right?
Yes. You think about how helpless it would have been for parents in, say, the 20s, where really there were no seizure medications, and here you have a child who is going to have this seizure disorder. What do I do? And it really was individuals who started playing around with the dietary changes to find that these high-fat foods led to ketosis, and the ketones actually suppress the seizure threshold. And there's an incidence of about a 40% reduction in the seizure. So now you have an option for your child. And they get to have like bacon and cream and cheese. And so they're usually pretty happy kids, at least in the beginning stages.
Well, let's talk about that.
I know. Oh my gosh. Like I said, you should feel a little dirty and wonder about that.
Yeah, and you know, I'm such an advocate of the rainbow and eating lots of plant pigments and carotenoids and colorful foods. So how do we effectively balance the ketogenic diet with lots of color?
So what we'll do is we'll talk about the real pitfalls that can happen for patients. And so the pitfalls are, you know, people dive into it and they sort of say, oh, well, this is just like the Atkins diet. And the Atkins diet was sort of a free form, eat as much fat and as much protein as you wanted. So it's just a meat and cheese type diet. Now, I always tell people, I said, you are not a lioness on the Serengeti. If you eat meat and cheese for the rest of your life, your gastrointestinal tract is going to hate you. You know, and so the things that make it fail is if you don't get all your colors in. So like I steal some of your color theories, and I always say red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, white, brown, and tan, and I've got your pictures for my patients. So you've got to get all these colors in by the end of the day. You have to avoid the fruit components because the sugars are too high. So this makes it a little bit more challenging. But if you don't get your vegetables and your colors in, you wind up failing in the nutrient component of the ketone. If you don't get fiber in, so now you have to have fiber for the short chain fatty acids for your gastrointestinal tract. If you don't get fiber in, which is hard to get fiber in with all these animal products, your gastrointestinal tract will not be happy. If you don't get water in, ketones become a dehydrator. So if you don't get enough water in, you're going to wind up running the risk of constipation or worse, yes, kidney stones. And there's a little bit of a trick I teach people is using salt. So what happens is in the early stages when you're starting to use this major food shift, you start getting dehydrated, and the organ that suffers the most is the brain. So the things that hold water in the brain are, sugar and salt. And if you're going to get rid of the sugar, you have to compensate by raising up your salt so you don't have that sort of horrible keto flu component. Colors are critical, and then some of the adjunct components in terms of the fiber and the salt are critical. And then the last thing that people don't realize is when you start taking in these fats, you have two options. You have animal fats and you have plant fats, or you have inflammatory fats like arachidonic acid, or anti-inflammatory fats like the omega-3s. So I think I took this from one of the IFM lectures. These are called fats without legs. So fats without legs are plant fats and fish fats. If you can get more of those in, you can stay on a ketogenic diet for a longer time period. But if you tend to go into the two-legged and the four-legged fats, you're taking in more arachidonic acid, more endotoxins, more problems. You actually start having problems with your immune system and your inflammatory system. So you actually get worse about 3 to 4 months in. So I usually tell people from an Aborigine point of view, you should get at least twice as many anti-inflammatory fats in if you want to stay on keto more than 3 months, just so you can compensate for those inflammatory problems.
So Lori's asking now, wouldn't it have been normal for people years ago eating seasonally to have anemic seasons that they were available?
Absolutely. So, I mean, someone who lives in New England, we have 4 clear-cut seasons. And I talk to people about saying, well, really you have spring where you're going to have the beginning stages of your flowers and your fruits. And, you're going to have the young animals, which theoretically are going to be easier to find. Summertime, you're going to be full in regards to your fruits. Wintertime, now you're going to get starches and grains. Fall or autumn, you're going to get starches and grain. In winter, you're going to have nothing. So you're going to be keto in winter, which realistically is 3 months. Problem is that now we have supermarkets and we have industrial living. So we don't really have winter. So though I agree with this component of eating seasonally and locally, people usually don't, because sadly, we're getting our colors from all over the world because they get flown in. So our body gets a little bit confused. Ideally, a season like a winter season for keto would be about 3 months. And I sometimes wonder if that's why problems occur after 3 months, because you probably should be cycling in and out. And I usually teach people the aspect of cycling carbohydrates and reverse dieting after the aspect of a good 3 month of keto.
There's something about that 3 month mark. It's almost trying out a for that 3 month period and then moving beyond that. I think it's consistent with our in many ways.
Yeah, and I sort of wonder like what happens in regards to our vitamin D exposure, with the seasons. And so there's all these other up regulations and down regulations of the immune system. I wonder what happens to just temperature, because we know that when we're cold, we get a little bit more brown fats, and that would affect our metabolism. And so, yeah, I'm not advocating that we go back to animal skins and spears and get hardcore, but at the same time, I think this seasonal and regional is probably a safer, smarter way, as long as keto or fasting becomes part of that seasonal rotation.
That sounds good. Chris, we have a question from Cristina. So she's saying we are allowed to have colorful fruits and vegetables. I'm wondering if maybe you can map out for us a typical day of keto if you want to have more of the rainbow.
So some of the things that you're allowed in keto, really a lot of the vegetables. So these are the components of so like what separates a fruit from a vegetable is a reasonable question too. So when you're going to have your keto day and you're going to incorporate your colors, you should be aiming for the vegetable component over the fruit, although there are some fruits that are allowed because of their sugar content. So I always talk about the idea about the vegetable parts of the plants are the non-reproductive parts of the plant. So these are the stalk, the stem, the leaves, the flowers, but the ovary, sort of the fruit part of the plant, now all of a sudden that's got to have a lot of energy to give to the next generation of plants. Interestingly enough, berries seem to be okay. And I sometimes, will raise the bar a little bit and say New England fruits are okay. Now, what does that mean? So in New England, we don't have tropical rainforests or anything like that. We'll grow apples and pears and some of these low glycemic index fruits. They seem to be a little bit safer, but the berries are probably the safest ones to do. So like, what's a typical day? So a typical day is you're going to have about a fistful of protein. So I said, well, maybe, and the best component is going to be, so each meal is going to be a fistful of protein. Ideally, you want to have a fatty protein. So you may have like a chicken thigh or a chicken wing, prime rib, an egg or salmon. You're gonna have a fistful of fat with that. So nuts, seeds, olives, avocados, and then bacon, cheese, mayonnaise, butter, cream. But if you have that too often, you increase the inflammatory components. Then you got to fill in the color components, preferably vegetables. Everybody's scared. They go, I'm gonna overdose on the vegetables. I'm gonna put myself out of ketosis because of the carbohydrate content. And I said, it's going to take an awful lot of broccoli and cauliflower to do that. So you're pretty safe with having sort of a cup here, a cup there. What I do, because I'm more on the medical side than the educational or the lifestyle side, I always direct patients to a couple of good websites that I like that will make menus for them. Because why reinvent the wheel? So basically, a couple of the websites that I like using, I use a website known as Ruled Me and Caveman Keto. Those are some of my favorite ones that just have endless amounts of menus and programs.
Excellent. Chris, let's talk about. I think I'm transitioning here. So, nutrigenomics. What types of foods should we be avoiding with diet?
So, in terms of the nutrigenomics, you really want to make sure that you're going to have individuals who can process fats well and process the sort of downstream ramifications of fats as well, so their cholesterol components. As much as there's sort of the nutrigenomic components, a lot of the research on the nutrigenomics and the keto is still relatively new. So I tended to look at sort of the big picture and then the micro picture. So like big picture components. If you have a patient that doesn't have a gallbladder, you have to think twice about that, because the gallbladder having bile is going to help you with the dissolving of the fat. So if you have somebody who can't dissolve the fat, they're going to have a much harder time with keto. If you have somebody with leaky gut or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, they don't have a fuel line that's going to help them with digestion. So you got to be a little bit careful about that. The big scary component is this apoprotein E. So apoprotein E, the big risk in there is cholesterol abnormalities and Alzheimer's. But it's a higher risk for Alzheimer's, and that's the risk as compared to the cholesterol. So interesting enough, there's only one study that was done with keto and apoprotein E, and it was done with mice. So it's just like, it's hard right now to make this decision. But the study showed that the cholesterol didn't change, it just didn't get better. So when they took the high keto diet in as an apoprotein E mouse, the cholesterol stayed the same. But here's the thing, apoprotein E carries sugar in around the brain. So when you start lowering the sugar from a keto plan, you lower the oxidative components and the risk for the Alzheimer's. So most of the individuals who are hot in the apoprotein E will actually promote the ketogenic plan as a treatment for the prevention of Alzheimer's. But again, the literature is still too new in terms of the PPAR gammas and like the COMTs and the MTHFRs. And so they don't have a lot of hardcore components. So I tend to look at the organs, and then again, just the apoprotein E seems to be a little bit known now. I think the main goal is to get in and out easily. People rely a lot more on the ketones in the blood, and it's misinterpreted. Couldn't agree with you more, Matthew. Can you be more if you're on higher ketones? And so I always learn from the IFM component of the, oh gosh, it was the hormones lecture on PTSD, production transport, sensitivity, and detoxification. And so the problem with ketones and measuring ketones is that, yes, you could be P producing them, but are you necessarily T transporting them and S sensitive to them? So, for example, you can have somebody who's eating a Mediterranean plan and drinking keto salts 3-4 times a day, flooding their bloodstream with ketones, but not in ketosis. So then they pee on their strip and their strip turns purple, and then they think they're in ketosis when they're not. What about measuring ketones? So you can measure ketones in your blood and you can measure ketones in your urine. You have to measure it in perspective of the patient. So if you have a patient with diabetes or cholesterol or weight gain or even seizure disorders, the clear-cut ones, and they're not getting better on the keto plan, but they're peeing keto or they're measuring keto in your blood, you have to rethink the component. It's really end game components, right? So when you take in high doses of ketones, like this question about what do I think about the exogenous ketones or the keto salts, when you take in the keto salts, you can flood your system with ketones, pee them out, and then say, well, I'm in ketosis, when really you're not metabolically in ketosis, you're just peeing ketones out because you have so many, you're carrying them around. So the question came up about, well, what do you think about exogenous ketones? And it's like, well, this is really good for 3 things. One, when individuals are transitioning from a sort of carbohydrate-based plan to a fat-based plan. I always say when you have a car and you're have a gas engine, you're about to shift it into a diesel engine, you know, there is this transition period in your body. The keto salts help you transition faster because they teach your body to run on ketones as fuels. They give you a fuel source faster. The other thing that they're really good for is keto salts help suppress your appetite. So this keeps you from sort of overeating on a keto plan. It also has a more rapid delivery system into the brain. So if you are sort of having that sort of groggy keto flu in the beginning, the keto salts help you transition out of that. And really the last thing is that keto salts help significantly with athletic performance. So individuals, because the keto plan is kind of high in the CrossFit world. And so CrossFit's actually going to need more carbohydrates for those explosive performances. But if you have an adamant keto person who wants to do keto and CrossFit, the keto salts help them perform so they won't get injured at the CrossFit time. So this is the comment. I think there's some listeners who are confused about the mainstream media attention of keto with the evidence-based components of the ketogenic diet. How do we combat this confusion? Well, honestly, what you have to do is you have to understand the biochemistry. So really what is sort of mainstream and fad-ish about the keto diet is the idea about like, well, look, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to keep muscle tissue, I'm going to have this beautiful beach-ready body or runway body, and like that's my goal. And so I always tell people that what separates keto is that there's 2 factors going on in keto. One factor that's going on in keto is that you're lowering carbohydrates. So when you lower carbohydrates, what happens is you lower insulin levels. And when you lower insulin levels, there is less proliferation from the insulin. So there's less fat deposit, there's less cholesterol deposit and cholesterol production. And it's this low insulin state that is one part of the keto. So all the cardiometabolic diseases that we use keto for get better. Now, in fairness, if you just lower carbohydrates, so let's say that somebody wants to do a high protein plan and a low carbohydrate plan, you can get some of the benefits of the low insulin from that kind of plan, just like you would get benefits from the low insulin from a keto plan. But what really makes keto different is its name itself, the ketone product, or the ketone production that occurs from this high fat content of the keto plan. So when you start using high fat, fats can't get into the brain, and so your body has to convert the fats into some other form that can get into the brain. And these small molecules, ketones, can get into the brain where the large components of the fats can't. And so what happens is the ketones are the other component that make ketogenic plans wonderful. Why? Because keto plans help the brain, the heart, and the muscles. They help the mitochondria. And so high concentrations of mitochondria, specifically the brain, the heart, and the muscles, help heal brain injury, heart injury, and then muscle injury. Okay, Maggie tells me that I've been doing strict keto for 3 months, testing my keto levels with a meter. I do intermittent fasting almost day, and I've lost 10 pounds. and most of that in the first month. Congratulations. I'm finding that I'm not getting enough fiber for proper bowel movements, which is usually a problem with the keto plan. I felt great initially, but not so much now. So 3 months, Deanna and I talked about this. This 3-month window is about when your body starts getting a little bit rebellious towards its food plan. So I always tell people that we have a couple of options at this 3-month mark. We can start shifting into a very heavily plant-based keto plan. So you start taking away the animal fats and you start focusing on the nuts, seeds, almonds, avocados in regards to the anti-inflammatory fats to get them into the plan. That will help with some of the lousy inflammatory processes that can occur at about the 3-month mark. Other things you have to do, I'm convinced you have to do some form of supplemental fiber. Supplemental fiber is going to help with this, and probiotics, because remember, you're shifting your whole dynamics in terms of your gastrointestinal tract. The other thing, we talked about this with some of the other comments, it's aspects about cycling in and out. So around 3 months is when I start doing this concept of reverse dieting. So in reverse dieting, what you want to do is you want to add carbohydrates in slowly but surely at different times of the day, specifically when the insulin levels are the most sensitive. So each week, you'll add in a carbohydrate, preferably at breakfast or around a workout, or earlier in the day or around a workout. And then every week, you add one more carbohydrate until you're up to around 5 carbohydrate servings in the 5th or 6th week. If you add them in all at once, you'll have a big backlash. If you add them in slowly but surely, you can actually have a transition in the world of reverse dieting. So just to answer your question, Maggie, one of the things that you might want to consider doing is actually switching over for the next 3 months into the reverse dieting, or shifting into the components of plant-based. So Tammy says, on average, how long would it normally take for you to reach ketosis when switching from a typical Western diet? It usually takes anywhere from 3 to 7 days, but that's only if you do it correctly. And so you really have to be a little bit diligent in regards to switching. Jacob Wilson is a PhD in Florida. He's like the guru in terms of keto. He will tell you that the first time he did keto, it took him 6 months to get it right. So it's not for the faint of heart. So if you do it correctly, it should take anywhere from 3 to 7 days to switch into the ketosis. I think Tammy had asked a question too about this aspect about, well, what can you use keto salts in terms of activity? And the keto salts are something that you would use pre-workout to get a little bit more energy out of the system, because the ketones can get into the bloodstream, and now you have a good fuel source already to get more out of your muscles and more out of your performance. What type of carbs? So I always will teach people that the lowest inflammatory carbs are the ones you add back in. I don't like adding in grains. I don't like adding in gluten. I'll try to pick colors and plants as my carbs. So really these components of sweet potatoes, starchy root vegetables, beets and parsnips. I try to add those in the beginning stages. And then after a few weeks, I'll bring in some of the rice and the corn and the legumes. But I usually try to pick like the root vegetables and the potatoes first in the beginning stages, and then if need be or desired, then we'll put in the heavy duty grains later on. How's your sound going? No good? Just so you know, Deanna can't hear you. She's just running the show. Oh, this is so lousy. Oh, that's so lousy. Thank you, Nikki. So Deanna's just like, oh, well, I can hear you.
I don't even know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. So that's good.
You can hear me. Okay.
That's good. So
I
if you can hear me, you just talk
over here.
So the components of adding carbohydrates in a systematic way to sort of do the reverse dieting component. Root vegetables sound perfect. That's exactly right, Maggie. What's your opinion on protein intake in keto? Matthew, that's where people screw up a lot. And so lots of times, especially in the athletic world, there's this big fear of going below 1 gram per pound. I got to get my protein in so I can keep my muscle tissue. But when you start doing keto, you spare amino acids so much that you don't want to go too high on your protein. So I always try to keep people around 20 to 25% of their protein, or around 0.5 to 0.75 grams per pound, because if you overshoot your protein, what will happen is it'll get converted in the liver by the Cori cycle and turn into carbohydrates, and that will mess up your ketosis. So low carbohydrate, medium protein, high fat, that's a real key component. So it looks like we're coming up on 9:30. reverse dieting for 5 to 6 weeks. Then what you'll do, Amy, is you're going to stay in a Mediterranean plan for those 3 months of the cycle, or those 3 months of the season, and then you'll switch back into ketosis, or you'll switch back into the ketone plan. So you do the Mediterranean plan for the 3 months, and then you switch back into the keto plan. When you're doing the Mediterranean plan, you actually want the carbohydrates to go into your muscle tissue. So you're going to have to add in some aspect of resistance training or physical activity to make sure that the carbohydrates go where they're best suited, which is going to be in the muscle tissue, glycogen, not in the fat storage. So that seems about, I got 9:30 at my clock. That's about the half an hour. Do you know what is time? Good or?
Yep. We're out of time, it seems. Chris, do we want to we'll have questions on the thread. By the way, I still can't hear you. I can hear other sounds on my computer, but I can't hear you. So, but you're hearing me. So what I'm thinking is that for all the questions that did not get answered, and you did a fine job of fielding all these other questions that I was seeing coming through the screen, if people can post them on the thread, that would be wonderful. And then we will also post for next month's Personalized Lifestyle Pearls, our next guest and topic. So thank you so much. As you can tell, you're a wealth of information, and you're so knowledgeable about the ketogenic diet. Really appreciate that.
Going around the country and talking about it, I've gotten to learn a lot. Really, what I want people to take away is that the keto diet isn't for everybody. However, it is a great tool to be used in your toolbox and to not be afraid of it.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
That was rapid fire fast. Hope you took it all in. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.